Alright, so we're continuing our tutorial series called the Abstracts series. And the Abstracts series is simply these abstract kind of backgrounds that I've been creating and coming up with and showing you bits and pieces on how to create something similar and how I started some of these effects or use them in artwork. Now, if you want the bigger version, PSD version of this one, it's available in my shop with the Abstracts one with the kind of flame nebula one that we used. And you can grab it there and kind of you can use it in your own artwork, and you can dig around in the Photoshop files and see how this was done. But I'm going to show you kind of how to do some of these polygon shapes and how to start to build something very similar to this. Alright, so let's create a new document. So File, New, and I've already got a set width and height that I'd like to use for this one. So we're going to use 1200 pixels by width by height, a square at 72 dpi. And we're going to press OK. Now, you're probably watching me in the lower left-hand side, so I'm going to kind of drag this over to the right and zoom in once so we can kind of keep everything on the screen here. And for the most part, this whole abstract series is just how to do a lot of these effects only in Photoshop. It doesn't require stock art or anything imported. You can do it with pretty much just a preset brushes and effects and gradients and tools and all sorts of stuff. So I'm going to kind of show you kind of around and just different approaches to things. So when I create an abstract effect or artwork or something, I don't usually like to start against just a bleak white background. So let's go ahead and give this some color, and I'm going to use a radial gradient to kind of start setting the form of the background and give it some color and start defining a palette. Now, for this part, you should pick any color palette you want. You can follow along with me if you want and use the same colors I do, but really do whatever you want. That's what makes these things fun. All right, so let's create a new layer down here, lower right hand side, if your layer palette is on the lower right hand side. And I'm going to set the foreground color to kind of a lighter bluish green, and the foreground is going to be our brighter spot, and the background is going to be kind of what the darker color that it fades into. So keep that in mind as you're choosing colors. Excuse me. So I'm going to pick something kind of like around here, and this is the RGB value is 29, 179, 174. I'm going to click OK. And if I start going too fast, feel free just to pause the video, especially when I have palettes open that has numbers and stuff, and just start playing again once you're set. So let's pick our background color. And I like this background color that was playing around with this earlier, and it's a darker blue, but it's still more on the cyan side. The RGB value is red is 9, green is 49, and blue is 75. Okay, so this part, just have fun, do what you want. I'm going to drag a gradient. I'm going to drag out a gradient from the upper left-hand kind of quadrant to the lower right. But first, let's choose our gradient tool. And you should see some options if you're using CS6 or greater in the kind of the upper left-hand side. So we want to make sure that our gradient is set to foreground to background. Okay, type is solid. Everything you see here, click OK. We want to choose the radial variation, so let's click that. All right, so on our new layer, let's just kind of drag out a gradient, and that's kind of our backdrop that we're going to be building against. One other thing I like to do to these type of to start these artwork pieces off is to give the background some texture. So a quick, real easy way to do that in a way that I like to use a lot is just by adding the noise filter. So let's go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. And you probably can't see this very well in video form because of the compression, but if you're doing this on your desktop or on your laptop, you'll see that as you're building this, you'll see kind of a paper texture in the background. So the amount I have is set at 2%, the distribution is set to Gaussian, and I have monochromatic checked on. So I'm going to press OK, and that's going to kind of help break up that gradient a bit more. Alright, so let's start building a polygon on top of this. And this whole effect that I use to create this style is that we define these polygon shapes, but we don't actually fill them all in with color. And I'm going to kind of show you what I mean as we go along. I'm just going to build one of these polygon groupings and then show you what you can do with it. I'm not going to build a whole bunch. These are like maybe 5 to 10 groupings of polygons, but we're just going to do one, and I'm going to kind of just show you effects that you can use with that grouping to start to create an artwork like this. All right, so when I say grouping, what does that mean? Well, let's start getting into the habit of organizing things, unless you already do this. Use this group icon down here. So we're going to create a new group icon. It looks like a little folder. We're going to click that, and we're actually going to go ahead and label it. So if you right click on group, let's name this one Polygon. Okay, so now we have that group selected. Let's create a new layer, and that'll put that layer right in that group, and it's easier to minimize and maximize the view on these things. To, you know, once you start really stacking a lot of these polygons around, it's going to get out of hand fast. So use groups and use labels to figure out where everything's at, and to be able to navigate your PSD file a lot quicker. All right, so let's go to that new layer, and we're going to use our Polygon lasso tool. So I'm going to select that, and let's create a 4-sided polygon, and we're going to kind of do, it's almost going to look like a stretched rectangle, or like a rectangle is coming out from the background, kind of like that. I'm going to kind of move it in the middle. Since we're just going to do the one grouping, let's get as much real estate as we can here. And there we go. Okay, so we just want to kind of paint in and define the edges. We don't want to fill the whole thing with color because that kills this effect, but we want to just kind of get it so the polygon almost looks like it's fading in from the background, or being or fading out, something similar to that. So let's go to our brush tool, and for this one we're gonna pick a foreground color that we're gonna paint with, and we're gonna pick kind of a darker shade for now. Actually, no, let's start with a lighter shade. So let's come up here, and I'm gonna pick almost a let's do something like this. So this RGB value I have is 207, 219, 219. Click OK. And your brush, if you right click, and I think this is the same on Mac, if you right click on your canvas, if you have your brush tool selected, you can bring up the size and the presets right off the bat. So we just want a soft round brush, okay? But we want to turn the size up to probably around 350 for how big this polygon is. And this is kind of determined by how big you just drew that polygon shape. So you'll see what I mean in just a second. So I'm going to do it around 350, 340. And then with this new color, I'm just going to simply kind of paint around the selection, okay? But I'm just simply defining the edge a little bit. I'm not painting through the whole thing, just enough to define that edge. Okay, so now I'll go to select, deselect, or Control D, and you can see we have the start of this polygon looks like it's fading in or out from the background. So let's build this into a three-dimensional shape, and this effect also it helps if you're just building a few of the sides. We're not going to build the overall polygon in the same technique, but we're just going to build a few of the sides. So let's go ahead and create a new layer, and we're going to build the side that's kind of closer to us if this was kind of a real shape. So we're going to go back to our Polygon lasso tool, and we're going to create another polygon on top of this, and you want it to layer, right? You want it to appear layered, but it doesn't have to follow it exactly, but just get close. Okay, so you can see we have this new selection. I'm going to kind of move it a little bit, and it's essentially, it looks like it's layered right on top of our background one. So I'm going to go back to the brush tool, and this time I'm going to select kind of a brighter color. So I'm going to select a brighter version of what we have, and that RGB value is 224, 237, 237. Same process. Let's grab our brush, and let's just kind of define in some of these edges. And what makes this effect work is that combination of transparency and the gradient to be able to see the layers, the other sides of the polygon essentially through each other. Okay? So kind of like that. So Control D to deselect, and you can see we have this polygon shape starting to grow. Now let's just go ahead and fill in one of the sides, okay? And really kind of build this shape up a little bit. So I'm going to create a layer in between these two, the top and bottom. So I'm going to create a new layer down here. We're going to zoom in so we can see our corners a little bit. All right, so I'm going to grab my Polygon lasso tool, and I want to follow one of these sides. So I didn't define the corner down here, so I just kind of have to guess, but you can kind of see where the side comes in, right? You want to follow that edge up to your corner, and then you want to connect the corner to the corresponding shape below it, to the corner below it. All right, so we're defining kind of this imaginary edge here. And this one I defined the corner, so I'm actually going to come all the way down to this corner. I'm going to come down further so you guys can see it. Okay. And then we're going to connect this selection up. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out and you can see that I just figured out where that edge is. So same process, grab your brush, and for this one I'm going to do almost a white. I'm going to do a little bit brighter, and I'm going to define this edge. Just like that, and I just kind of clicked from the outside in. I'm just using the fade of the soft brush to define the edge. And actually, I'm going to select, reselect, and I'm going to get this corner down here just for some variety. There we go. So now that I have this in a group, I can just simply select a group, right? And I can pull this whole thing wherever I want it. All right, so that's kind of this is the basics for starting something like this. This is, like I said, it's that same process, just stacked up in a bunch of different groups. Probably, I think this was around 10 different like bundles of polygons floating around. So that's how you get that. So let's build one more polygon, but we're going to use kind of an orange color. And we're going to do more of a cube shape, all right? We don't want to be in this polygon group, though. We want to build a new one. So let's go back to our grouping icon and create a new one. We're going to name this one. We can either name it Polygon, or I'm going to name it Polygon Orange. So I think we're going to do this one kind of red-orange. I'm going to create a new layer in that group, okay? Let's go back to our polygon selection tool. And this time, let's do more of a maybe a cube. We'll kind of mimic a little bit of what we did here. You can see there's kind of almost a cube shape here. It's a very skewed type cube, but we're going to do a cube. So I'm going to do the I want this to overlap, so I want to do more of a squarish four-sided shape. Okay, let's pick an orange color, kind of an orange yellow. And I want a pretty saturated one. And sorry about that. The RGB value for that is 255-180-35. Click OK. Go back to our brush tool and let's do the same process. Let's just start defining the edge here. Okay. We have that polygon. Let's go back to our polygon selection tool, create a new layer, and let's do kind of the top side. And see how it's not a perfect cube. It doesn't really line up. We're just kind of helping it start to make shapes. So for this one, I'm going to pick kind of a brighter color. I think I'm going to make this one more red-orange. Okay. And this time, I'm going to bring the size of my brush down. Again, the brush size is dependent on how big you drew the polygon. So, because you don't want a huge blast of color right in the middle or anything. So you can see I'm just painting from the outside in, and I'm just using the natural fade of the soft round brush to achieve that effect. So Control D to deselect. Now let's build up a couple sides. So I'm going to do a layer in between these two, right? I'm going to zoom in so I can see my corners. Polygon lasso tool. And let's connect up some corners here. And if things start getting muddy, you can always hide layers below it or other polygons you got going on. All right. So we have our side there. Let's change the color. I'm gonna go back to kind of the yellowish. Maybe do a little bit brighter. And I'm gonna paint in from the outside in one of these sides. Okay. Kind of like so. And you can see we're starting to build this shape. So let's do one more. I'm going to do this other side. New layer. Polygon lasso tool. I'm going to zoom in again because I can see corners, but they're just barely there. So I'm going to connect up my corners. Just like so. And I'm actually kind of off on that one, but I'm not going to worry about it right now. Okay, so paintbrush tool, and I'm going to take a swatch of this orange and start to just kind of base it off that. So this RGB value is 255, 135, 51. And again, define that edge from the outside in. There we go. And that's looking pretty sharp. So now I can just simply grab my grouping and kind of drag it wherever I want. Okay. So another thing that I like to do, and let me think if I should do. I really need to do another grouping of polygons to make this effect so you can see kind of how this whole effect works. So let's go ahead and let's do it one more time. So I'm going to make a new group. I'm going to call this one Polygon. If I can spell Polygon, I'm going to say it's going to be darker. New layer. I'm going to do this kind of fast because you guys saw how this works. So I'm going to do another shape. Okay, I'm gonna pick a color. I think I'm gonna do almost a black. Bump my brush size up. You know, right click on the canvas for the most part, and you can get your brush settings. Okay. Control D to deselect. New layer. And this one I'm going to do pretty close. I want it to be almost a wedge. Okay. New layer. I'm going to do kind of just a hair lighter than that. Paint that in. Just get the edges. Okay. I'm going to zoom in. Layer in between. New layer. Polygon lasso tool. Connect the corners as best I can for now. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to select a brighter color, I think. So this one, following along, it's 139, 155, 161. I'm going to really kind of brighten up that edge. Okay, so now I've got 3 groupings of polygons essentially, and then this is where you can start playing with layout and to really determine where you want everything to go. Okay, so let me grab all these polygons and I'm going to kind of move it somewhere where we can see it. Now, the other big part of this effect is to, once you have these polygons kind of shaped in, is to duplicate them and break them apart, and that's what makes everything kind of look like it's coming in or growing out of each other and starting to take a larger shape. All right, so let's create a duplicate copy of our bottommost polygon first. So Control J. Okay, now let's Control T, and we're just going to kind of rotate it. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. Just do it however you want. I'm going to move that out. Okay, so now I'm going to open up that grouping. I'm going to select the topmost layer, and I'm just going to kind of peel this thing apart. Okay, and this is what's going to give it this effect. Except I wanted this side kind of like that. And you can start to very, very subtly kind of rotate pieces and edges just like that. Now let's go ahead and duplicate this darker one. And you can take either one. It can be either the layer on top or layer below. Okay, I'm going to pull this one way out a little bit further and start to break that one apart. Like that. And you can see the same process as how we did kind of these groupings. If you look here, if you can see on my screen here, see where this pink overlaps this kind of greenish one and it's got a darker edge? This whole group is tightened up here, but then it's broken apart down here. So all I did was I duplicated that grouping, rotated it, what would that be? Clockwise, dragged it down, and then just simply picked each layer and started to peel them a little bit apart from each other. Not like, you know, all over the screen, but just enough to break up that shape. So let's grab this last one, this orange one, Control J, and I'm going to drag this one up here. and start to peel that one apart. Just kind of like so, and you can move it wherever. Like I said, this is essentially art, so just have fun. And there we go. So that's how you start to construct this whole type of shape and overall artwork. So another thing I want to show you, and I see this quite often in other artwork, other pieces where people will go and grab stock art of lens flares, or it looks like just a light beam. I'm going to show you how to create something very similar, and we're going to use it to accent these edges. So let me show you in the original. If you look at some of these edges, they have this glow or this light beam that goes down some of the sides. So we're going to create something very similar, right? And we're going to use that in ours. And you'll notice in this whole polygon piece, there's only maybe about 4 of these. So they're used as just a detail, as just a highlight, just a way to kind of break things up a little bit more. So above everything else, above all your other layers, let's create a new grouping. We're going to call this one light beam. And we're going to create a new layer in it. Now we want a brush, soft round brush. We probably want around 10-12 pixels. 12 will be good. And let's go ahead and start with a kind of a yellow, brighter yellow color. So this is going to be 255, 250, 163 for the RGB value. Click OK, and then just make a dot. Click, and that's how you start. Control T, hold Alt, and grab one of the left or right hand sides and stretch that puppy out. Okay, just like so. Now Control J, go to that, duplicated that layer, go to Image, Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast. Okay, I'm going to check on Use Legacy, and I'm going to turn the brightness up just a bit. And this is going to make it more of a white, bright beam. Click OK. Control T to transform again. Hold Alt, but this time let's drag one of the left hand or right hand sides back in. Okay, you can see we're layering up this light beam. Control J again. Image, Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast. Check on Use Legacy. Brightness up again, and this time almost white. So I upped it to 43. Click OK. Control T, and let's shrink this one down. Now this time, holding Alt, grab the left or right hand side, and after you do the left hand and right hand side, we're each time we size these layers down, we're sizing them down about halfway of the original size. Now grab the top and bottom, hold Alt, or grab the top or bottom, hold Alt, and drag in just a tad. All right, you can see we have that light beam kind of effect. One more layer. Pick almost a white brush color. Okay, this is 255, 254, 242. Just a couple digits off white, which is 255 for all. Click OK. Now with my brush, I'm just going to do one more point. I'm going to do maybe a couple clicks in the center, and that's going to give it that little focal bright spot. Okay, so this whole light beam group, I'm going to minimize that. Control J, because I want to keep one in my back pocket in case I need to size one down again. So I'm going to move that one out of the way. I'm going to go back to the one that we did. Now this is where you start to rotate it and transform it to find an edge. Okay, so I'm going to bring it down here, and I like this edge, or where these two sides of this polygon goes. So Control T, I'm going to hold Shift and grab a corner, and we want to size these way down. We built the master big in case we need to go back, but for the smaller, for the actual edges, we want to bring them down pretty far. So I'm going to move this into place, and then I'm going to rotate it to line up with that edge. And you might have to zoom in or just get pretty close. And as you can see, that's how we start using these highlights to define these edges. Now, the ones I did in the original file, you can start to play with blending modes and really change things up. So I'm gonna toggle off the original one real quick. So you can do something like this. Let's create another one, Control J. Let's highlight another edge. Move this one up to here, Control T. All right. I'm gonna size it down. Oops. I'm gonna rotate it to match up as best I can that edge. There we go. That's how you start kind of breaking things up and giving it brighter, you know, really defining where the seams of those polygons meet, and it gives it a pretty cool different look. All right, so the last big thing is we're gonna create a little more depth on the background, and by doing that, we're gonna grab let's grab a few of our polygon shapes. I'm just gonna grab them all and see what it does. So I'm holding Shift and I'm selecting all of the groups of polygons. I'm gonna press Control J, okay, Control E to merge. So now we have all our polygons merged here. I'm going to zoom out one time, Control T. Now we're going to scale this up. All right, I'm holding Shift and Alt and then rotate it and just kind of figure out a placement for it. Have some fun. Let's do something kind of like this. I like the general angle that everything's going. Maybe something like that. Okay, you're probably wondering what's going on. Okay, drag that layer right above your gradient layer. Okay, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Let's turn the radius up to probably 7 or 8. I'm going to go to 9. Okay. Now this is totally up to you where you place this. It's really dependent on what your original polygons look like, and this is what's going to start to give everything some more depth. So now you can do a number of things on here. They're starting to blend together up here though, so we're gonna get that out of the way. Let's create a layer mask. So the layer mask icon. Okay. Now we need the gradient tool again. We want to make sure our foreground and background color is black and white because we're just using black and white to draw on the mask. Let's go back to a linear gradient, and then let's just kind of fade out the top of this. So we just get the bottom part, and if I zoom out, you can kind of see that. So now you can start playing with blending modes and opacity and start to really figure out how this thing's going to fit in. This does add some pretty cool depth though. So if I change this to overlay, you'll see that it keeps the consistent shapes that we have going on, but it applies a little more depth into the piece. So if I set this blend mode to overlay, and then I'm going to turn the opacity down to maybe 70%. There we go. It's almost like a shadow or something. So it kind of breaks things up, and it starts to make your overall piece look a little more together, I guess. So one last thing that I want to do, I showed you how to, remember when I said in the beginning that I was going to show you how to take groupings and then just make them do different things? Well, that's what we just did with that background. To add more depth, we just took the groups, we flattened them, we scaled them up, we gave them a gradient blur and changed with blend modes and set them at the bottom, and that did kind of a shadow. So let's do the opposite. Let's grab one of the groupings and take it to the top, do the same process, and maybe we can do more of a highlight out of it, but it retains the consistency of the shapes. So let's go back to our polygon orange, right? This more cubic one that we have up here. Okay, Control J, okay, Control E to merge those together. So now we have this polygon grouping. Let's go to filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Okay, let's turn the blur down a bit, maybe to 4. And the blur is really kind of dependent on that polygon size. So I'm going to do 4. We're going to go to Image, Adjustments. And for this, let's do Hue and Saturation. Okay. So let's start bumping the saturation up a little bit more, but let's really bump the lightness up. And we're going to get it pretty much white. Okay. So now we've essentially made a white blurred version of one of our polygon groups. So now let's Control T. And we're going to use this as almost like a flare, a lens flare or something. And we're going to kind of size it down and you can rotate it and then just kind of put it, overlap it, and use this as a highlight element for your piece. All right, so let's change the blend mode here to, well, you can make it more subtle, or you can make it more loud. I'm going to set it to color dodge, and I'm actually going to blur it a little bit more. So filter, blur, Gaussian blur, and let's blur it again. This time I'm just going to blur it a couple more pixels, the radius to 2. Okay, so that's going to help kind of give everything a little more highlight. You can do another one, Control J and Control T, and just kind of layer it on top of itself to get kind of another hot spot. But let me show you in the original piece where that was used. So if you come back here, you'll see there's two of them. There's one up here in this upper right, and there's one down here kind of dead center. Now that's another, I just took a grouping of elements, merged them together, blurred them like we just did, and then either played with the blending modes or just played with the opacity or the color levels, brightness, whatever you want, just to kind of use that as kind of another floating little element. But you can see they still have kind of that polygon shape, right? So it remains kind of an overall consistent shape and feeling to the whole piece. So that's really about it. You can do a number of other things to this. Like I said, this style really starts to come together once you do a lot of different polygons and shapes and such. For me, I think what I want to do is possibly I want to brighten up kind of the center point real quick. I'm just going to paint in a white value and then kind of fade that back out. That looks kind of cool. There we go. That, to me, that just helps boost the contrast and makes it feel a little more complete, even though to me this is still kind of just starting out a bigger piece. So that's about it in a nutshell. Let me put these side by side so you can just kind of see that this is essentially the beginning point to what we did for Abstracts 2. There's a lot of other little effects going on here. We'll cover those in other techniques. Another one that I want to cover is this kind of Aurora Borealis. Is that how you say it? The northern lights that are coming through to do coloring there. But that's really how you do it. That's how you construct one of these pieces of art. And you don't need stock art. You don't need to go find stuff. You can do all these little kind of lens flares and details on your own and just have some fun with it. So if you use this technique for anything, if you build some artwork out of it, please tweet it at me. Show me on Twitter. I like to retweet that stuff and show it off when people come up with their own artwork with this type of stuff. And then you're probably seeing on the screen the previous video, which we did, which is another technique, which was the flame nebula thing. And if you really want to have some fun, merge both of these together and see what you can come up with, see what type of art you can bake up. So again, this ran for a little bit longer than expected, but we'll do another tutorial on this Abstracts 2, and then I've got 2 other ones in the works that should be up here soon with the overall pieces. Again, if you want to grab the big version of this document of the original Abstracts 2, you can get that from the shop. Also, if you want to use, or if you want to look at the one we built today, I'll leave that in a link below, and you can go through these layers and see how things were done. And that was about it. All right, so I will talk to you next time, and over and out.